Give everyone just a few minutes to get into the webinar, and then we'll get started. Good morning and welcome to our property owner webinar series. And this webinar will cover your notice of appraised value and how you can navigate the protest process. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can use the Q&A feature and submit your questions there. And at the end of the presentation, we'll circle back and answer any questions you have. So notices of appraised value, that is a notice that the appraisal district sends you every year. We are required to appraise property annually and determine a market value and then report those market values to the property owners. And we do that through the notice of appraised value, which are mailed in April of each year. And the purpose of appraising property at market value is really just to ensure that everyone pays their fair share. So that tax burden, you can think of the overall tax burden as a pie, and the appraisal just determines how big or small your slice of pie is going to be. And so that notice of appraised value is our report to each property owner, letting them know what their market value for the tax year is going to be. And those are mailed again in April of every year. And don't panic, because changes in property values, while that might affect your tax bill, doesn't necessarily increase or decrease the amount of taxes you're going to pay. The system is designed so that each taxing entity they calculate what's called a no new revenue rate at the beginning of their tax rate setting process. And that it gives them the same amount of revenue as last year using the new updated values. So it should reset everything. And then anything above that no new revenue rate that they set, that's what's actually increasing your taxes. So again, those are determined by the taxing units and their budgets. And as we get into the summer, around August, the beginning of August, you can start seeing those proposed tax rates and budget information on our website, travistaxes.com. And you can see your specific property and how those rates are going to impact your tax bill. So notices of appraised value we started mailing those last week. If you haven't received your notice yet, it does take us a few weeks to process all of those and get them out in the mail. But if you do not receive it, you can find that same notice on our website, Property Search. It's traviscad.org. And you can download a PDF copy of the notice, and you can also see all of your property information on that site. And your property information is found on the very first page of your notice. A couple key things on the notice of appraised value: your property ID, which is a 6 or 7 digit number that we use as our account code here at the appraisal district. That's found on the very top right hand corner of your notice of appraised value. And then your e-file PIN is the second really important piece of information that's on that notice. You're going to need that e-file PIN to set up your portal account if you don't have one from prior years. And that e-file PIN is used to then associate your account with your owner login on the portal. And it allows you to do all those portal functions that you can do through the protest process. And we'll cover some of those shortly. So there are really 3 key terms that you'll need to understand when reviewing your notice of appraised value. The first is the market value, and that's simply just what your property would sell for as of January 1st each year. The second term is your net appraised value. And the net appraised value could be lower than your market value if you have a homestead exemption. Homestead exemptions allow for a 10% increase per year. So it limits that growth. And so your net appraised could be lower than your market because you may only experience that 10% growth per year and not the full market change on your property. So the net appraised is just that limited value if you have a homestead exemption. And then the taxable value is the value after all of your exemptions are taken off, and that's the value you're actually going to pay taxes on. Okay, so let's take a look at our notice of appraised value. So on the first page, you're going to see the two terms, the three terms we just talked about: market value, net appraised, and your taxable. So the market value is listed on the very first page of the notice. As you can see in this example, the market value of this property is $757,000. And again, the market value is just what your property would sell for on January 1st. The appraisal district is required by law to appraise property as of January 1st of each tax year at 100% of market value. And so our goal is to get each property's market value established as of January 1st and then send that notice of appraised value to each property owner. Market value has no limit on the increase or decrease. It's just what the market is doing. It's just the current real estate market as of January 1st, kind of like a snapshot in time. That second term, net appraised value, can be seen on the first page of the notice as well. And again, this is that limited value based on homestead properties. This could also be a limited value if you're not a homestead property, but you qualify for the circuit breaker limitation. And that circuit breaker limitation is similar to the homestead exemption, but for properties, other real properties that do not have a homestead exemption, and it limits their growth to 20% per year. So homesteads are limited to 10% per year, and circuit breaker non-homestead real property are limited to 20% per year. And just as a reminder, when you purchase a property, that first full calendar year that you own the property is what sets your base value. So if you purchase a home, you may benefit in that first year that you purchase it from the prior owner's limited value or net appraised value. And then that first full year that you own it, you'll see that net appraised reset to the current market value. And then in following years, you're limited to the 10 or 20% increase in values. And we covered that. All right, the third term, that taxable value, is also found on the first page of your notice of appraised value. You can see in this example, the taxable value for 2025 is listed for each taxing entity that taxes your property. And that's because each entity can offer different exemptions. And so your taxable value, for example, for Austin ISD, may be different from your taxable value for City of Austin. And again, that taxable value is the value that you're going to pay taxes on. And it's just your net appraised value less any exemption amount. So for example, school districts, each school district has to offer a $100,000 homestead exemption. So you take your net appraised less that $100,000 homestead exemption, and that gives you your taxable value. There's also on the first page of your notice of appraised value, what we call a tax ceiling. And if you have an over 65 exemption, then your school district taxes or any other taxing entity that elects a tax ceiling, it freezes your school tax amount in the year that you turn 65. So you'll never pay more than that over 65 tax amount in the year you turn 65. On the second page of your notice of appraised value, we provide a breakdown of your property for this year and the prior year. And so you'll see here in this example, we provide the market value of any building and structures, the land value, the total market value, and then you'll see if you have a homestead value limitation or a circuit breaker limitation because of that 10 or 20% growth limitation. You'll see that amount there that is limited. And then you'll also see at the very bottom any exemptions that are on your property. So we encourage property owners when they get their notice, it's really important to check and make sure that any exemptions that you qualify for, they're showing on your notice of appraised value. We want to ensure that everyone's getting those benefits that they're entitled to. Also, in your notice of appraised value, you're going to see protest information and how you can protest your property. So one of the main things on this page is the deadline that you have to protest by. You'll see here in this example, it's May 15th. And generally, the protest deadline is May 15th or 30 days after your notice is mailed. And 90% of property owners get their notice with a May 15th deadline. There's also some information on how you can submit a protest. We include a protest form, which we'll cover here in a second, but you can submit your protest through the Postal Service. You can drop it off in our office, but the easiest way to file your protest is online, traviscad.org/protest. And then it's really quick and easy. You file it online, you can upload your evidence to us, and also see any information that we have on your property. It also gives information on informal meetings with an appraiser where you can meet informally and discuss your property. And then it also provides dates when the formal appraisal review board hearings will begin. And for this year, it'll be June 2nd, 2025, and they'll go throughout the summer. The notice of appraised value also includes a description of common homestead exemptions. So we encourage you to look at those different exemptions and see if there's one that you may qualify for, but you're not currently getting. And then if you find one that you may qualify for, call our office. Our customer service staff are here to help. They can provide answers to any questions you have and help you get an application filed for that exemption. Exemptions are the biggest benefit for property owners because they're directly reducing that taxable value. So we want to make sure everyone's getting the exemptions they're entitled to. Generally, the deadline to file for exemptions is April 30th. So review the exemptions that you might qualify for, get that application in. There are some circumstances where we can go back and retroactively apply an exemption. And again, our customer service group is here to help with those questions. The Comptroller's office has a division called the Property Tax Assistance Division, and they put together materials, and this is one example that gets included with your Notice of Appraised Value, and it's the Taxpayer Assistant Pamphlet. It has a lot of information about the protest process and how appraisal works. Our staff also does a really good job of trying to pare this down into consumable, manageable chunks of information. traviscad.org/protest has really easy to understand instructions on how you can go through the process of protesting. So I encourage you to look at our website and also read that taxpayer assistant pamphlet. You'll also see a notice of protest form in your notice of appraised value. Again, generally the deadline to file your protest is May 15th or 30 days after your notice is mailed. Your notice of appraised value will have that deadline that you have to submit your protest by. And the protest process is really a simple process. You file your protests. Again, May 15th is generally the deadline. And then you have the opportunity to meet informally with one of our appraisers. And this it started last week on April 14th. It is optional, but we encourage you to meet with our appraisers and see if we can come to an agreement before going through the remainder of the protest process. But if you don't reach an agreement after meeting with our appraiser, you can then attend an appraisal review board hearing, which is a formal hearing with an independent body. You'll sit with 3 ARB members on a panel. You'll present your evidence to the panel. Our staff will present their evidence to the panel, and then that independent panel makes a decision on the value of the property. And you can resolve your protest at any point during this process. So you could file your protest, get the evidence we have on valuing your property, and then decide, okay, well, I agree with that. And you can withdraw your protest. There's no negative impact to your property. So protest process, very straightforward. We're here to also answer questions. If you have any questions about how to protest, what information you need to include, you can give us a call or check our website. And we always remind property owners, you're not protesting your property taxes. You're protesting the market value of your property. So keep that in mind. Appraisal districts don't set taxes. Those are through the taxing entities. So you're protesting the market value of your property. And also remember that even if you successfully protest your property's market value and you get a reduction in value, it doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily affect your assessed value. So you can see in this example, the net appraised value, which is that limited value, is about $300,000 less than their market value. So in that protest process, you would have to reduce your property from 552,000 to 232 before you see any impact on the taxable value and what you're going to pay taxes on. So again, filing a protest is really easy. We recommend filing those protests online through your online portal because it's the fastest way. You get an immediate confirmation. You can also upload any documents you want us to look at. You can download the documents we have for valuing your property. You can also accept or reject any informal offers through the portal. And informal meetings are scheduled at your convenience. You go in and schedule yourself for a date and time that works for you. And that's all done through your online portal. Again, you can also file that protest in person. We have some drop boxes available. And also you could just bring it into our office, and then you can file it by mail also. The Postal Service sometimes doesn't get mail to where it's supposed to go. So if you're going to send it by mail, we encourage you to use some kind of delivery confirmation and do it plenty in advance so that it can get here on time. Getting our evidence, again, is through the portal. You don't need to, when you file your protest, there's a checkbox that you can mark if you want to get that evidence that we have for valuing your property. So you can check that box, and then we'll upload that to your portal account where you can download and review it. If you do want to receive it by mail, you have that option as well. They're mailed 14 days in advance of your formal hearing. So if you're not doing that through your online portal, there's a delay, and you won't get that until about 2 weeks before your formal hearing gets scheduled. So again, we encourage everyone to use that portal account. It's the fastest and easiest way to get any information on your property. So that's step 2 in the protest process is the informal meeting with an appraiser. Those again started last week, and electronic offers are sent to people through their portal account. Informal meetings are held through the phone or video conference. And this is just a very informal meeting where you can discuss your property with an appraiser, point out some things you would like us to look at and consider. They are available on a first come, first served basis each day. You can get in line if you just have a few spare minutes. There is usually a longer wait time if you don't have an appointment and you just get in line that day. Again, you can also schedule yourself at a date and time that works for you. There's only one informal meeting per property. Unfortunately, we get 187,000 protests each summer. And so we have a very short amount of time to meet informally with all of those property owners. So we only allow one meeting per property. And then we do ask that evidence be submitted to your portal account prior to that informal meeting so that our staff can review it. And then it's a very efficient conversation. And then offers, if you meet with the appraiser and you talk about a value, they'll come to an agreement. That offer would be sent within 48 hours, and then you would accept or reject it through your portal account. We encourage everyone who wants to go through the informal meeting process to schedule themselves. So pick a date and time that works for your calendar. You can schedule through your property owner portal account. And then also that the day of your informal, you'll log into your portal account and then join that virtual meeting for your informal meeting. If you do not schedule yourself, then you can get in line the day of. Again, there's a little longer wait time for that, but you can get in line at traviscad.org/getinlineonline. So you'll need to provide your name and contact information for informal meetings, and that's to ensure that you get the link to join the informal meeting. So you can, again, log into your portal account at your appointment time and check in for your informal meeting. And then you could also join that day's queue by just going to traviscad.org/get-in-line-online. You will get text message updates throughout the wait, and then you'll receive the link and a phone number to connect to that informal meeting. If you have your informal meeting and still you just don't agree, you can't reach an agreement, you can go to step 3 in the protest process, which is the formal appraisal review board hearing. And again, the ARB is an independent entity. They are not TCAT employees. We don't have any influence over them. They are an independent body that makes these decisions. And again, you'll sit on a 3-member panel. They will listen to your arguments and your evidence. They'll also listen to our arguments and evidence, and then they make a decision at the end of the hearing on what the value of the property is. Once you have that formal ARB hearing, you'll get a notice of final order via certified mail, or if you've elected for electronic delivery through your portal account. And then that notice of final order will have additional steps that you could take if you're still not satisfied with your property's value. You have the option to go to district court. There's binding arbitration options, state office of administrative hearings. So there's multiple options if you're still not satisfied at the end of this process. And those ARB hearings start at the beginning of June, and they'll run throughout August. Hopefully the end of August is when we'll complete all of those hearings. And those formal hearings, you can participate in person at our office at 850 East Anderson Lane. You can also participate remotely through a video conference option. And then you also could do by affidavit. So you can attach your evidence and sign a sworn affidavit with your evidence and comments about your property. And then the ARB could use that instead of you being here in person. With ARB hearings, the wait times do get long. So virtually, you can check in and you'll just be given a link once it's time for you to join, which is convenient. You can do that from the comfort of your home or office. And in person, just be prepared for a possibly longer wait time when you come in person for those hearings. So what can help you lower your property's market value through the protest? And that's evidence. The best evidence of market value is a sales price. So if you get your notice of appraised value and your market value is above what you paid recently to purchase your home, you could give us a signed closing statement or settlement statement, and we'll reduce the market value down to the sales price of your property. We only look at sales from January 1st, 2024 on. So we have some parameters that the sale needs to be within. You could also ask a real estate agent or broker for comparable properties in your neighborhood. They can give you a sales report that shows the sales in your area that have sold with the sales price. You could also get comparable homes and look at the equity amongst those properties. And comparable homes should be similar in size, stories, effective age of the property, quality of construction, and they should be in pretty close proximity to your property. And again, the time frame for those sales is January 1st, 2024 through February 28th, 2025. We also encourage you to look at the characteristics of your property and make sure they're correct. Those can be found on our property search of our website. And just confirm that everything we're listing in your improvement and characteristics section matches what your house actually is. If there are differences, you can present us with as-built construction drawings, dimensions, current fee appraisal sketch, and we can get those corrected. If your home has costly repairs that need to be made, that's also good evidence. And you could present us with repair estimates to fix the repairs. You could also send us current photos of issues in your home, engineering reports, costs. The best evidence for any damage is the cost to repair the damage. If you are submitting photos, we ask that the photos not be very close to the item you're trying to get us to look at. Take a step back, make sure it's showing the full, like if you're, your wall is, you have a crack in your wall, and show us the entire wall, not just the crack, so we can see what we're actually looking at. Other helpful documents might be a survey of your property or floodplain information, any construction draw information if you just built your property. If you had a recent fee appraisal done through, refinancing or purchasing your home, that fee appraisal is great evidence. And then if you're a commercial property, any operating statements, rent roll information, that would all be great evidence. And the evidence has to be submitted in advance of your formal hearing or informal meeting. You can submit those again on the online portal, in person, or by mail. If you are mailing or dropping off paper evidence for your formal hearing, give us about up to 15 days to process those. So we have to get them, we get a lot of paper, we have to scan it in and get it on your account so it's available when the ARB is ready to do your hearing. So a few things to avoid. Don't wait for the deadline to file a protest. We have 187,000 protests that are getting filed through this protest process. And a lot of people wait until 11:50 on the night of the deadline to submit that protest. And then there's a hang up. And so if you just file it early to ensure that it gets in, there's no issues with the protest. Yeah, don't wait till the deadline. Also, you should avoid comparing price per square foot of properties because there's a lot of adjustments that get made during that process. And then again, you're not protesting your property taxes. You're protesting the value of your property. So don't argue about the property tax and how that's affecting you, because that's not something the ARB can decide. They're deciding value questions. And again, don't wait until the last minute to file that protest. So if you submit your protest early, you have more time to resolve that protest, more time to schedule that informal meeting. And then in that informal meeting, the appraiser may give you insight into a few things that would help you in that protest process. So it gives you more time to gather those useful documents if you go on to the ARB hearing. And again, homestead exemptions are the biggest benefit for property owners. It gives you, directly reduces your taxable value, but it also gives you that limitation in value growth. And during the COVID years, we saw significant increases in market value, sometimes 40 to 50%. And those people who had a homestead were able to limit that growth each year to 10%, which is a little more tolerable. There are exemptions for anyone who owns and occupies their home as the general residence homestead exemption. There's also exemptions for if you're over the age of 65 or disabled. Disabled veterans have exemptions they qualify for. And always check our website because each exemption has required documents you have to submit with that application. And almost always a driver's license is required. So a driver's license or Texas ID card, and the address on your driver's license has to match the property address. And we are now required to audit homestead records once every 5 years. This was passed in the 88th legislative session back in 2023. We are using a phased approach, so we'll do about 1/5 of the homestead exemptions each year. If you've had an exemption for more than 5 years, you may not be audited right away. So you may have not been picked in this first year. This year, we looked at exemptions that were granted prior to 2009. So you'll receive several notices from us if you are being audited for your homestead exemption. You'll get mailed notices, you'll get portal notifications. So we typically give you 5 or 6 before any action is taken. you have to meet the current eligibility requirements for the exemptions to continue. So, for example, prior to 2009, a driver's license wasn't required as part of the exemption. And now it is. So those individuals who received their homestead exemption prior to 2009 had to provide us with an updated driver's license. Not completing the verification process or responding to our request will remove the exemptions from your property. And so your tax bill will be impacted by that. We have more information on the exemption verification program at traviscad.org/verify. And then at the beginning of August, the taxing units start taking those steps to adopt a budget and calculate tax rates. And all of that gets put into our website at travistaxes.com. It operates similar to a property search on our website. So you put in your property address or property ID, it pulls up your specific property and how each of your taxing entities and the proposed rates are going to affect your property. We have, again, 187,000 people who are coming in to protest their values each summer. And the entities may have 10 or 15 people that show up to a budget hearing, which is really what's impacting the amount that you're going to pay in your taxes. So again, travistaxes.com has all of that information beginning around August 7th. And our website has a lot of information on the protest process, traviscad.org/protest. So we encourage you to go to our website. We have good information that's very consumable. So traviscad.org/protest. And then we do ask if you have any feedback for our webinar series, things you want us to cover, or things that you think we should go into more detail about. You can use the QR code here on your screen and give us feedback on today's webinar. And with that, we will answer some questions. So there's a question on how to find out what all the codes mean on the website. So on our website, traviscad.org/public information, there are different reports that will outline what state codes are, or improvement codes, market area codes. If there's a code that you're unsure of, you can call our customer service group. They can answer that question for you, or you could file a public information request and get all of the information. So you might get all of the state codes and what their descriptions are. We've also received a lot of questions about the change in land and improvement values this year. And in mass appraisal, which is what the appraisal district does, it is different than a fee appraisal. So when you purchase your home or you refinance, you get a fee appraisal done, and that appraiser comes out and looks at just your property, goes inside your house. Mass appraisal is what appraisal districts do, and we're looking at a grouping of properties and assigning a value for property tax purposes. Land is probably the most difficult thing to appraise in mass appraisal, because we just, especially in the Austin area, we don't have a lot of just vacant land sales. So the land and improvement can vary year to year. What we do is we are appraising the property as a whole, because we know we have sales prices of properties as a whole. You're not purchasing just the improvement or just the land. And then we use like a building to land ratio to abstract what that land value would be. So you aren't protesting the land value or the improvement value, you're protesting the overall market value. So that allocation or abstraction of what that land value is really just a mathematical formula. There's a question about turning 65 this year, and why isn't the freeze year and ceiling filled in for me? So if you turn 65 and we have your birth date or driver's license available in our system, then we can auto add that over 65. If you do not have the over 65 exemption, but you're 65, that means we didn't have the information to add that exemption. So you can fill out the exemption application, we'll get it added to your property. And then that should show on your notice of appraised value. So there's a question, and this one's specifically regarding condos, but there is, it really is about fairness and equity, and appraisal of how properties are appraised. So in Texas, the Constitution allows for two different protest methods. You can protest the market value, which is the sales price of your home or the what it would sell for, and you can protest equity. And you should be taxed equitably with other similar like properties. And so for condos all in your building, which is what this question's referring to, all of those condos would have been appraised in the same methodology. And so if you're finding that you are higher or lower than many other condos in your building, that would be a good reason to protest. You should be equitably taxed, or appraised with other like properties. So there's a question about the homestead value limitation, and it is showing a 0 on page 2 of the notice, even though there's a homestead exemption. And that just means that your market and your net appraised are the same. So we are in a very stable market right now. Generally, residential properties saw about a 4% decline in market values this year. So you get the benefit of the lower of your market or net appraised. So if it's showing 0, that means that those two numbers are the same. And you haven't experienced that substantial growth that would warrant that 10% limitation in value. Purchased a home in March of this year. The property tax records have not been updated to reflect the new owner. What do I need to do if they mail the appraisal to the previous owner's mailing address and not mine? So you could call into our customer service group and they can walk you through how to get that PIN number to protest. You may be required to submit the deed. We get that information from the Travis County Clerk's office, and there is a delay. So you could provide us your deed, we can get that ownership updated, and then give you the PIN to the property. And there's a couple questions about who can protest if you just purchased a home. Both the seller and buyer can protest the property. So if you purchased a home this year and you get the notice of appraised value, you are entitled to protest as well. How are improvements evaluated? I read it was replacement cost of improvements. Shouldn't it be based on what it adds to the value? So yes, there are multiple ways that you can do appraisal, and mass appraisal. So one of them is the sales comparison approach, which looks at the sales prices of homes that are similar to yours, makes adjustments. The other is the cost approach, which looks at the replacement cost of the structure plus the land. So there are a couple different ways, and it really depends on your property. So I would encourage you, if you want more details on that, to protest. Get that evidence packet from us that has all the details of how your property was appraised this year. And then review it, and you may go, yeah, that makes sense. And you could just withdraw your protest, or you could go keep going on through the process. Does an air conditioning replacement currently qualify for a costly repair? It depends. It depends, and I don't want to speak specifically about air conditioning replacements, but generally, if there's a repair that is needed on your home, we're looking at, does it affect the market? And so if replacing or repairing that defect would get you more money when you go to sell the property, then it likely would result in evidence for a protest and reduction of value. Because again, we don't know your property. We're not going in like a fee appraiser and looking at the inside of your home and really examining each property. We're looking from the exterior of the home, and kind of looking at the neighborhood as a whole. So there are things that you know about your property that we wouldn't know. So yes, if there are repairs, submit that protest, and we can review it. There's a question about renovated homes versus not renovated. Comparable homes are homes that are like yours. So if you are looking at the evidence packet and you see the comparables have all been renovated because you live in that neighborhood, you know that your neighbor down the street just had their new kitchen put in, then protest and we can look at that information, but you should be compared to other similar properties. There's a question specifically about uh, plumbing on a home that was purchased. So I don't want to get into specifics about each property, but if there are repairs that need to be made to your house, we encourage you to protest. Um, give us information that we can review, and then our appraiser can make any adjustments that they think should be made. What if you miss the protest deadline? So again, generally that protest deadline is May 15th. There are very few late protest remedies if you miss that deadline. There are certain circumstances where you can apply, and our customer service group can help you with that, but they're limited. So make sure you get that protest in by May 15th. A nonprofit owns a home for a disabled or low-income family, can we apply for an exemption? So the owner of the property generally has to apply for an exemption. And we have a whole webinar on exemptions. So I would encourage you to check our recorded webinars and see if there's more information there. If you still have questions, reach out to our customer service group and they can answer those for you. Oh, that's a good question. So if you go to our property search and you see NA or not available for your values on your property, that just means you haven't, your notice hasn't been generated yet. So once we generate that notice, then the values are populated as we're mailing them. So if it's still showing NA, don't worry, you just weren't in that first group that got notice, and you'll get it in the next few weeks. There's a question if the PIN, the e-file PIN, is unique to the property or to the owner. And the e-file PIN is unique to the owner, not the property. So when you sell a property or purchase a property, the previous owner giving you the PIN won't help you. You'll need your own owner PIN. Any other questions? I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. But again, our customer service group is here to help. If you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to them. They know the protest process and they can help you with any questions you have with that process. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And if you have anything else, reach out to our office and we can give you some help. Have a great day.